no?
Freeze! I'll shoot! How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
My Uncle Paulie's pretty much a scumbag. Not that anyone has the balls to tell him to his face. Paulie took me out of an orphanage I lived in after my parents died. It's kind of like being rescued from a shark attack by a grizzly bear. The only reason he took me in was because he needed another hitman. We never did see eye to eye.
Most of us have stood on the edge before. We stand there and ponder what would happen if we took one step closer to throwing ourselves off into the realm of the dark. Hell, some of us might be all the way there, a bona fide edgelord. You're no one's pawn, no one understands you, and, best of all, no one can get close to you without cutting themselves. Yeah, it's pretty cringe. But most of us go through this phase, normally growing out of it after a few years, though some of us never truly stop thinking it's cool in that over-the-top awesome way. What isn't cringe, however, are comic books such as The Punisher or The Darkness, comics whose stars are as much villains as the heroes. It's not every day a company takes a stab at a property like this that isn't content with making absolute garbage shovelware to make a buck, so it was kind of surprising, to those who knew it was a comic property anyway, when a company like Starbreeze, the developer behind the original Xbox's Chronicles of Riddick: Escape from Butcher Bay, decided to make a video game based on the Darkness comics. Now, spoilers ahead of time, but Starbreeze decided to do their own take on the story instead of a direct adaptation, probably smart as video games are a completely different medium. That being said, were they able to make something special? It's not like Starbreeze are strangers to Edge, what with bringing sci-fi Vin Diesel to life, so maybe they can do my boy Jackie justice. Let's get a big grim and find out, shall we? You only turn 21 once, eh? Hell, growing up in general tends to be a mess for all of us, but let me tell ya, none of us have it as bad as good old Jackie Estacado. You see, little Jackie Estacado just so happens to work for a guy who don't work for any guy, you know what I'm saying? And it was while he was out doing what needs doing, on his 21st birthday no less, that our story begins. That's all to say that we play as one Jackie Estacado, a hitman for his Uncle Paulie in the mean streets of New York, and, on his 21st birthday, shit goes bad for him, and the cops, who are on his uncle's payroll even, try to kill him. Unsure of what's going on, Jackie defends himself and finds himself on the receiving end of corrupt cops and an angry mob boss. Clearly shook by the whole thing, his day gets a whole lot worse when the attacks and murders of his uncle's goons awaken something far more evil within him, and something voiced by Mike Patton of Faith No More, a being simply known as the Darkness. Jackie's power explodes from within him, granting him extraordinary powers that allow him to decimate his uncle's forces, giving him the opportunity to find a way out of the mess he's found himself in. To make matters even worse, the Darkness is fighting for control, whispering in his ear and influencing his actions. To say any more in the story would be criminal, as the narrative is excellent and the most engaging in any other first-person shooter, especially at the time. There are twists and turns, some obvious, others not, that really shake the story to its core, and it melds the rather mundane, for video games, world of the Mafia with the dark world of survival horror quite effortlessly. On top of that, the characters are great as well. Jackie and his girlfriend Jenny really make you care for them, and you're constantly rooting for the good guy mafiosos to win over Paulie, who is incredibly easy to hate. And that's not even to speak on the Darkness itself. It's all very well done. The Darkness is a strange game to play, which is weird to say about a first-person shooter in the era of first-person shooters. You control Jackie and do your typical first-person shooter things, aka move and shoot at things until they die, but you also explore a heavily detailed world on top of that, find collectibles, and complete side quests for more collectibles. Now, there is nothing to do in this highly detailed world outside of murder and collecting, kind of like the world of Pokemon actually, but Starbreeze tried their best to make the gameplay stand out as much as they legally could. Gameplay is much slower paced and heavier, and Jackie primarily dual wields because of Edge. He also doesn't carry ammo, instead carrying bags of guns around just to toss them when they run out of ammo, pirate style. Reloading is for normies. Gunplay is also very loose. You are relying on your auto-aim here, which is fairly generous but not entirely accurate, at least from a distance. Because of the modern and mundane setting, weapons aren't the least bit outlandish, consisting entirely of modern pistols and shotguns. Sadly, shotguns can't be dual-wielded. Of course, shooting and walking isn't what makes this game so special. No, that would be the darkness itself. The darkness is activated by pressing the L1 button and gives Jackie some buffs and powers. Just having the darkness out is enough to make Jackie more resilient to gunfire, and pressing R1 will activate your current darkness ability. Now, early on, the game will just be a shooter, as you'll only have the very specific ability of sending one of your darkness tendrils out to scout and activate switches, something not used terribly often, meaning you'll want the darkness active but only for its shield. Of course, with it being the darkness and all that, you'll want to stay in the dark, meaning you'll want to be shooting lights in the combat zones. Being in the dark recharges the darkness, and being in the light drains it. Once you get on in the game, however, you'll gain a couple of useful abilities in combat, such as the ability to use a tendril as a sort of spear, grabbing objects and impaling enemies. Using these abilities can be quite clunky, much like the rest of the gameplay sadly, as you can never quite be so sure where you're going to be targeting with them. How disorienting the darkness tendril can be on walls and such would make even the xenomorph from Alien vs Predator blush also. You can also summon a Darkling, a little goblin-like creature to fight on your side, even if he isn't going to do a whole lot. Still, the Darklings and powers do add enough to the game to make it less tedious than it could be, especially seeing as you do nothing but fight dudes all day. Usually in horror games, you want the lights on. Here you want to stay in the dark. It's kinda refreshing. Oh, how the turns tabled. Every day you walk these same filthy streets, kicking the same old garbage out of your way. You do it so often that you never even stop to ask yourself, why? Why is this place such a fucking mess? Why do humans go out of their way to make the place they live such a dump? You ask that as you toss an empty can over your shoulder, throw a wrapper at the garbage but miss, and guess what? You can't be arsed to pick it up. That's kinda what it feels like walking through this game world. It's a grimy mess and it's beautiful. This is an early generation PlayStation 3/Xbox 360 game, so it isn't going to be winning any awards for its beauty, but boy do I love how these kind of games look. In fact, I'll go far enough to say that this looks like it was an Xbox game at some point, like an original Xbox game that decided to port forward. Taking place in the grimy backstreets of New York, everything is dark and dirty, and, as mentioned, highly detailed. Each street, each apartment, each room, and each gun are filled to the brim with small details that have no real reason for being there. They are just there to make the world feel more natural, and boy do they excel at that. Dishes are left out, movies are being advertised, youths and delinquents are advertising that they don't care about those advertising with their graffiti, and the subway stations and trains themselves looked like they were never cleaned their entire life. The game is constantly set at night as well, making it seem even grimier. While the world is great looking, the character models and resolution are much weaker, with characters looking like toys awkwardly being moved around and made to look like they were talking during dialogue scenes. One thing the game does extremely well presentation-wise, outside the lighting, are loading screens, which are mostly masked with monologues from our dear Jackie, usually about what is going on in the story. These are extremely well directed and set the mood quite well. They aren't quite Max Payne-ish in tone, especially since Jackie doesn't really have a way with words, but they fit quite well and are very memorable. They just set the scene and give us some insight into the mind of who we were playing, even if Jackie is no brainiac. Another standout is the darkness itself. Duh, considering it's the name of the game. Mike Patton does an amazing job voicing the Eldritch being, and its animations are incredible, giving even the embodiment of evil personality. The music is also well done and just as moody. The presentation here is top notch, even if the character models and resolution do leave something to be desired. There is also that section that I'll just leave a teaser for here. You ever run with a crew and get into some shit often? Like a real tight pack of idiots that have more balls than sense? Well, in every pack of crooks, there is the dead weight. Like a real useless son of a bitch that fucks up every task you give him and he constantly puts you and your entire operation in jeopardy every job. The kind of guy you only keep around because he's related to you, or because you're going out with his sister. Of course, the game has plenty of problems, most of which I went into some format already. The gameplay is quite clunky, with inconsistent aim and with loose shooting. The darkness powers are cool, but can be awkward to use, especially that tendril. The resolution looks quite low in spots, and those character models... Ugh. It's all stuff that'll add up to frustration, but it really doesn't hurt things too much, you know? The gameplay is fun enough, and the world is detailed enough, and the story is engaging enough that this really doesn't drag it down. Which is good stuff, as it is janky. Gotta love that old world jank. Leaving my own monologuing alone for the end here, The Darkness is a fantastic mix-up of the first-person shooter genre, and a nice reminder of how games used to be designed back in the late 5th to early 7th generation of games. Its mixing of horror, first-person shooting, and adventure is refreshing in a gaming world that is obsessed with open-world games today, and it was refreshing in a gaming world obsessed with straight-up visuals and traditional shooters back then. The fantastic and emotional narrative combined with the straight-up edgy themes and powers make for an unforgettable game. At least from me. 2K, the publisher of this fine game, have all but forgotten our mobster friend, and that is a shame. Regardless, my gift to Jackie on his dark and tough 21st birthday is an incredibly solid 8 out of 10. The night may be long, Jackie, but you'll make it through alright in the end. You always do. You always do.
Fight fire with fire. That's what I always say. My Uncle Paulie always goes for the spectacular when he's breaking somebody's balls. Let's see how he likes it when I do the same to his main man.